Good morning, Croissant. Welcome to Creative Mornings. Sorry we're a bit delayed with the start. A few technical issues, but everything seems to be going all right. We're just checking to see if any automatic WhatsApp sort of notifications would just pop up in the screen before we start. Thank you so much for chapter for having us today. I think I've always wanted to do one of these talks here. I think it's such a fantastic space, and it's just the perfect location for our guest today. Um, I'm just going to go through a few things. Yeah, Creative Mornings, we have a theme every month. The theme for this month is Crossroads. Um, and a beautiful illustration by Joanna Cagnadi. And this is an opportunity for me to thank our sponsor, Adobe. Adobe make this happen, and they're very kind in the fact that they also sponsor Creative Mornings globally, and they sponsor our little chapter as well, which is very nice. And they do have a video. I'm not sure if this moves. Oh, it does. I've checked this already. We're not on here. Gutted. I've made a formal complaint to Adobe, but waiting on a response. But it is nice to see that this event is going on all around the world. This actually made me more nervous. God. Right. Anyway, today we've got a fabulous guest, Thom Botwood. Thom is an old friend of mine. We actually went to school together. What I love about this is that in Wales there are just people working from a house out in Llanharan on a housing estate, and they're doing illustrations for Disney and working on Zoom calls with Tim Burton, and they're in Llanharan. It's just nuts. And then off to London for the weekend to hang out with Emma Stone, and just I love the fact that they've decided no, they don't need to go to Hollywood, they don't need to go to London, they're happy in Llanharan. It's Llanharan, isn't it? So really embarrassed now. Anyway, Thom is a fantastically talented man, and I'm sure he's going to talk you through what he does. But if, in case he is modest, this guy has worked in teams that have won Oscars. I cannot wait for him to tell us all about his work, his inspirations, and his journey. That leads me just to welcome Thom Botwood.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
I'm going to do the lights.
Sure thing. So, hello, everybody. As Harry's quite lovely sort of introduction to me, my name is Thom Botwood, and I'm an illustration artist, costume and concept artist, and essentially for film. So, some of the titles I've got just behind me, essentially, I sort of start with Cruella. So, the journey is sort of essentially from there, but almost 7 years prior to that. So I've got a degree in design, and essentially it's kind of what sort of led me almost to my first role. So this is just a talk that's essentially it's not a process of how it is, it's just how I've worked and kind of just how I work, I guess. It is a physical illustration, so it is dip nib, ink, and paper, which you'll see some of them are on the stage here actually, and there's some more in the bag behind, which you're more than welcome to see later on. I am quite nervous because I don't actually do this, so it's bear with me if my voice is a bit wobbly and whatnot. But I'll click through essentially. So essentially, I've just named it the process. In actually Harry asking me to do this, it's quite a nice thing to kind of actually look at your work and I suppose how you work or define the process. So I've called it the process, but it's a process. Okay, so essentially it's sort of wording it that how I work is absorbing information, managing a vision, combining a vision, and then essentially it's problem solving. So really, I guess all I do is solve a problem. So we create an illustration that doesn't exist, or an image of something that doesn't exist yet, or is in the mind of a designer, in the mind of of a director, and essentially this kind of section is a nice way of sort of, I've put it into quarters, but I suppose there's probably many more other ways of that we work, but the absorbing information from, I suppose, essentially the script, but very much from the director. So the directors have a really large kind of say and a vision on how this film is going to look and how they want it to look, which you then marry in kind of the vision of the designers and the information that everyone is kind of giving you. So essentially it can be kind of mood boards, or a written piece. It's there's many ways of doing this, but as I said, managing the vision of the designer, particularly the studios and the directors. Okay, again, repeating myself, but really these are the kind of the collaborative ways that this whole process works. Okay, so I hope I'm not waffling, but equally this is, I suppose, how it works in my life really. Mood boards are quite big, although they're not. They're mood illustrations for me. So it's the board is kind of something that you produce, but there's little bits within those boards that are kind of your driving force. And I'm often drawn to the real darker kind of grittier side of something. And then we sort of kind of create much lighter references. But I just love the sort of, underneath the stage rather than on the stage. Does that make sense? It's that sort of what goes on behind and within really. And then delivering is essentially, my product is the costume illustration, and then the product is really, I suppose, the film and any kind of merchandise that comes off any of that. Involved in a film at the moment, which is essentially very much driven on you're creating the next. It is the next action hero. It is the next. It was described to us as the next Halloween costume and the next best-selling toy. So there's that whole thing of it doesn't drive you, but it's there. So you know about it essentially, and then maybe PR work after. Okay. So this is actually a mood board that I've done of my work. So I've just recently in January completed a short film costume design role for a very, very beautiful film called Powdered and Dancing. So essentially this is a character called Sydney, and it's the premise of the story is essentially it's a 1930s underground sort of gay bar, and essentially it's the family within that kind of that bar kind of creates, and these people come to visit, and it's a way of life essentially. So Sydney is kind of an old head. He's part of everyone knows Sydney. So essentially I had this illustration of Sydney in my head, and then moods that kind of an imagery that kind of creates him in my head, and then essentially you then source it in cloth and clothing and whatnot, and then essentially it becomes Sydney. So there's a lot in that, which for me it's the smudge and the mark within his garment. It didn't apply in the end, but it's him. I just knew it was him. He's heavily powdered, but equally it's a grace and a beauty. So the grace and the beauty is kind of within the peony, but also it's within the staining and the mark of shirting that is kind of years old. So I'm very much drawn always to this kind of thing, and sort of the sequins off the slipper. I love that. Like, where did they go? And they've gone for a reason. They're very well worn. He's treaded the boards. The marks within his soles of his feet, I love essentially. And then there's another character called Kitty, and it's very much this kind of smudged makeup. It's just beautiful. But anyway, my mind kind of goes down that route. So this is an example of a mood board, but for an independent film. And again, it's absorbing information, combining vision, managing a vision, and then problem solving. So the problem being solved in, we created the look. So the information was script. Vision was myself, I guess, managing the vision of the character and the actor, or actors, and then essentially producing the end piece, really. So I think it's a 15-minute film, which they're aiming to hopefully release in Cannes Film Festival, which is lovely for the production, really. But that's an example of a mood board, I guess, that I would work on, okay, or that I would sort of produce. And then there's a wedding dress idea, which was made from bed linen and bed sheets. And it's gorgeous. So when it is out, please do keep an eye on Powdered and Dancing. I'm really, really proud of it, and it's gorgeous, gorgeous film. And it's shot in film, actually. So it is actually shot in celluloid, I believe. Anyway, and then Corella, which was my first job in film, and just a huge role in the sense of what it was you grew to do, really. So I am or became hand of Corella. So anything that you see Emma Stone, write or illustrate or design is something that I've illustrated, and then it's been used on film. It was also something that I was brought in to do costume illustration and hand of Cruella. So it's a really unique kind of role in the sense that there was almost quite a few hats that kind of, or maybe one hat that fitted on many different roles, really. So it was always within the one sort of vision of it being, it's always like Estella was the character who became Cruella, and then it's Cruella's work, but they're the same person. So there's a real kind of hybrid of illustration really within it. So I concepted an artwork that she would use through the film, which was her style of drawing. But then you've got a costume illustration at the same time at the end of it, which needs to be something else. But then I blurred the two, so the costume illustration almost became concept art that was used in the film, and it was quite a mix of styles, but then it went on to becoming kind of red carpet PR stuff and Crocs prints and whatnot. So it was just a real joy, I've got to say. And I think I did that job not knowing how long I was on it for, and I took it literally week by week, thinking, okay, everyone seems to be quite fixed on this Joe. I'm like, well, I could be gone next week, so I've just really got to make an impact. Didn't realise I was actually contracted from the April to the November. I had no idea, but it was my first film, so I was just thinking, I'm out next week, and I wasn't. And it was weird, but I kind of still live like that in a way. But it was lovely. And this is actually an example of the only digital illustration I did of it, the entire film. And this was actually specifically for Craig Gillespie, the director. And there's a quote which says, like, show me what this looks like. If it was a different artwork, but it was this illustration we mean, when I talk about that bit in particular, okay? But I love this film, but I loved it as a child, and I seriously loved it as a child, and it was the illustrated works of the animation that I would watch again and again and again. And then to fast forward and be hand of that character that I just desperately loved as a child was just incredible. And some real huge opportunities came during it, and then subsequently after for doing it. And it's just, I'm very, very proud of it. And also, I don't mean that from like my point of like contribution. I mean from the whole production side of things. It was incredible. And what the end product at the end of it is just, if you've not seen it, it really do. It's just a really lovely film, but I think we're chatting to in the foyer just then, it champions kind of illustration, but it champions kind of a time which I suppose was just, anyway, you'll see. Sorry, I really love it. So, first ever illustrations of the pieces, of really, I suppose, the iconic kind of pieces that became later were really, it was this rather beautiful lady on the left of the screen, essentially. I did a little project before, so I was meeting Jenny Bevan to go up for what I thought was like an interview. And I'd done a sketchbook that Cruella would have done, or Estella would have done. So there was a mini kind of 15, 20 pages of scroll. She had interchangeable boobs and whatnot, so it was all changed. But I love the idea of Cruella without the wig, because she's very much about the black and white hair. But I actually thought to myself, wonder if, imagine that was a wig and it was something that she just bedsided at the end of it, where she's sort of on that really beautiful kind of devil phone, and it's the bald side of it, and I loved that. So that was this. And I was went up to chat to Jenny and showing her the bits, and she goes, "Oh dear boy," she goes, "this isn't an interview," she said, "you've got the job, it's just to see you and to meet you, really." And that was just really lovely. And I remember I bought a new outfit, I bought new socks for that whole thing. I really did. And I had Love Heart socks, and she was, "I love your socks," and we just chatted. But we had something in connection, really, was, I suppose, which brings me to kind of how I got into this industry. So I was tailoring, and I'll try and do it really quickly. Dr. William Price outfit it's a remake for the Llantrys and Guildhall And a friend of mine who I used to do my business with, we took the pattern from this 130, 140-year-old, I think even older, garment of Dr. William Price, and it was obviously all stretched and out of proportion. And I'm not a historical patterner or maker by any means, so it needed to be referenced, and I took it down to a lady who was a friend of Joe's, which was my silent partner of the business at the time, who used to work with Jane. And unbeknownst to me, it's Jane Law. So Jane Law is kind of just the mecca of pattern for film, and I think every industry member goes to her for very good reason. And she referenced the pattern and squared it all off, and it was quite pressured because of the timing. So she sent it off, sent it back to me, and it was all done, and it was lovely. And I sent her some illustrations and said, listen, thank you. If there's ever anything I can ever illustrate for you, a point, a thought, then just let me know. And I'd WhatsApped her about 4 or 5 illustrations. And she messaged me to say, thank you so much. These are just simply wonderful. I know a friend who's looking for a costume illustrator and a film that's looking for somebody to be the hand of Cruella. I think your illustrations would be perfect. I hope you don't mind, but I forwarded them to Disney. And I thought, she didn't even ask, you know, it's... But that was it, and that the friend was Jenny. The film was obviously Cruella, Disney, and the rest is kind of history on that one. So from this, went to that, and essentially it was kind of, we needed to come up with a military jacket that was for a photo bomb moment. So it was the Baroness's car scene, and it was the petal dress and the military jacket. So this is the kind of concept that I was talking about that was for the hand of Cruella. But equally, you're creating a concept and maybe a costume illustration of something in the style of the character that's going to be in the film. And it kind of just wound up quite nicely. So this was the first piece, which is actually on the left here. And then from these drawings, then it kind of makes its way onto stands. And the incredible buyers, they source these kind of, you know, authentic, original pieces, and they kind of make these really lovely, sorry, am I in your way? No. Really lovely pieces from it, really. And then the teams behind this are just, you know, I think there was 4 different cutters with, you know, 4 or 5 different makers on each sort of unit, and in Pinewood. So it was just a huge floor of just creativity and amazing people and friends, essentially. And that's kind of the other thing with the industry. It's just it's people you meet. It's just gorgeous. I love it. So yeah, so these kind of pieces were the sort of origins of what that style would become. And really, the Cruella without her wigs, it was at the time I thought, well, I don't know what the hair is going to look like. Yes, it's black and white, but equally, if somebody looks at something and thinks her hair wouldn't be like that, then the whole drawing is done. So I just took it, I just kept it off, and really they run with it, and it became a style that was then sort of used. And yeah, I was quite surprised that it was on the red carpet for the launch, because actually she is black and white hair. And they chose not to do it on all of them. So it was quite lovely to see it, really. So yeah, heavily inked. This was, I think, in the sink, kind of being watered upon 3 or 4 times in its lifetime. And it just equally, it puts the ink in the page, weakens the paper, it takes the ink differently. So this was kind of very, you know, at one point, very flaccid illustration, which I was hoping would come back to life, and it did, and it still survives. So I've got that now in my house. But it's just a lovely memory of a particular piece and jacket, essentially. And then you've got the garbage dress. So essentially, trying to say the process again, there's lots more behind it. It's not just this, and this. There's loads and loads and loads, like patterning alone for that piece. This lovely, it's the bit you don't see, that undergarment, that dress is just gorgeous. But that said, there's some concepts of it, and I just thought, well, it's a garbage dress. Let's basically make it out of like garbage. So I just sort of, it's paper, it's offcuts and scraps, and she's probably about so big on kind of a page, and then it becomes like a board. So she's a beautiful thing, and I think she's probably in Disney storage somewhere. But it was quite effective, and then of course teamed with the illustration of what she might look like in the Hand of Cruella style. It makes its way to stand. If you see the length of that train, it is genuinely that long. So it is just, it's a fantastic thing to sort of create that, and then you go next door and you can't go in because they're making something which is, you know, that. It's just lovely. But equally, you're given you know, Jenny's looking at certain aspects that she wants within the shape. It's you know, it might be like a Mugler type something or other, or it might be something, you know, of a vintage imagery that she's seen. We knew there would be newspaper in there because I think Disney wanted to put, like, I'm not sure if it was Tatler, but it was something. So that was just the idea of the newsprint. And then essentially you see the end result, really. And then the hair is also really similar. I mean, it's better here than the illustration, but it's just something that kind of envelopes, and it just all becomes one vision, essentially, which is that kind of combining visions and people's kind of expectations on things, essentially. But it's a joy. But I think that does then clip off. So where there's actually, the girls are stood there, I think it clips off to about that point, and then it becomes another, that length again. And for the film and the shooting, it was just exceptional, really. But that's an example of a process. It should have been a process, not the. And then the red dress, essentially. Again, from illustration through to stand. I put these little, I don't know, little details on bits that kind of then make it to be the image, I suppose. But it was very much the lady on the left, the far left, was something that I'm illustrating as a point of for Cruella's sketchbook, and just in general, like, you read that it's a red dress and it's just where your mind goes and what you can be. And then I think Jenny loves the idea of the looseness of Mark, and it obviously connects with her vision. And then before you know it, it's making its way to stand. And then it was too red, so then they slash it, put another cloth underneath, and it just grows organically. I think in the end they realised that the back detail is lost too much. So whereas it's not quite the same as the drawing, it starts there, and then they realise actually they'll shred the neck. It's just a lovely kind of process to see on the stand. And having made it as in garments, you realise actually that would take you probably best part of 2 weeks to create if you're on your own. But actually it's been made in like 2 days, 2-3 days. It's just astonishing. You know what I mean? All of the people you work with, they're just so talented. And I think this dress in particular was Ian Fraser and his team, and it's a joy. But it's just some marks, really, and again it's in the style of Cruella's hand, and then I guess just in more of a costume illustration style, but equally keeping the ink, which is really something I really found. I had 2 pens, dip nib pens, that were part of props that I took and started using, and I thought, I just love this way of drawing. So really I've got this kind of film to actually, which sort of kick-started my love of ink again. And then that's kind of what I do as a result. So I've got a lot to thank this film for, essentially. And Jenny Bevan for the opportunity, because I had no experience in film whatsoever. And then, so this would be an example of costume illustration, or some people would call it concept illustration, but costume illustration. And then this is where it says, show me how this works. So this is how this looks. And it is essentially based on a cloth that Craig liked but couldn't see it as where it would be. So essentially you just create a little something of what that might look like, and then essentially it's then becomes a 3D piece and a promotional image, and it's just lovely to be part of, really. But it is, you're creating someone's vision, i.e. Jenny Bevan's, but equally for someone, i.e. the director. So I always think of it as that sort of quartered thing. There is almost a relationship to stuff like that. And I hope that's right in saying, but there is almost that kind of connection with why you're doing this and what it's for and whose vision it's for and what it's contributing to, which is the product. So it's a product in itself, but it's for a bigger product, which is the film. I hope I explained that well enough. And then, these are styles of illustration that would be Estella's, Cruella's hand, but also mixed in is kind of the Baroness costume illustration as well, and then the white dress, which is the one that kind of the taper dress, which kind of burns and goes. That was the concept illustration for that alone, essentially. And then the biker, the moped photobomb moment is the little kind of mood and sort of theme illustration for that. But this is actually Cruella's desk, essentially. So as seen, I suppose, as they say, but Jenny just had this lovely thing. It's just he does these wonderfully abstract and funky drawings, and that was kind of just something I put in because I suppose it helps describe the style really. Other than it just being, I mean, it's lashings of ink on this guy. Like she was, yeah, like they're just fun to do. They're really, really fun to do, and I think it just plays quite well for the film really. But as the film develops, the phases of the desk grow. So if you look, like when she's younger, obviously, or the younger days in the film, or in the development of the story, there's maybe X amount of drawings on the wall. Phase 2, there's more. Phase 3, there's more again, and all of that is content that you've got to create. So essentially, all of this is specifically drawn for particular things. Like what would she be doing? She's described as a genius. She needs to be constantly. So in a way, you have to take that on and just draw. And it was just a joy. I mean, you come up with some, quite Pet Shop Boy kind of worthy pieces, but they were in, and it was just a real pleasure to do, really. But even the little notes and stuff that you write next to the script and were kind of in there. So it's funny, the rooms are kind of, your office is kind of something that was scanned and used and taken on. But again, it's all based on drawing. Just a pure joy to do, really. And then hero illustration. So hero images, it's essentially something that makes it to screen. So this is like the moth dress. And essentially, I think this is where this, like, Jenny's vision was, it was a domed dress, essentially. She knew it would be domed. And then you're kind of given, there's this one piece, which is kind of a chrysalis, kind of golden egg, I suppose. And you've got to kind of combine what that would look like times maybe 3,000 pieces. So from that and kind of a domed dress, you kind of have to think as to what it would be. But it's also, she needs to be seen to be drawing something. So this is actually one of the things that she's drawing in the alley of the Baroness's house, studios, for which she rips the Baroness rips the drawing out, and it makes the part of her collection. And it's quite it's quite lovely to see, because there's a few things on this. There's teaching Emily to draw, if that makes sense, or to hold the pen. So Emma Stone is essentially, you're one-on-one with Emily, and it's this, she's quite daunted by the fact that I've got to look like I'm doing this. So we spent some time of how you drew it, like step by step, and what the drawing would look like and what you need to do. So rather than it being like you need to draw the whole thing, we just thought, just do the circles. So you just do circles, but you do it quite confidently. So there's a load of practicing on that. But what I didn't realise is, come the film, she's holding pens like I do, which is quite lovely. So in the left hand, you sort of hold your, I didn't realise I did it until I saw that, but she sort of picks up on that. So there's just little bits in that which you look at and you think, oh God, that's your way of working, which is really, really sweet, actually. But I guess she just took it as, he does that, I'll do that. But she was a real joy to work with, really. But there's loads of scenes in it where they're used. And that's something which was, you're doing this stuff, but often it's edited and it's lost. But actually most of the stuff that was done was kept in, really. But so from concept of the dress, that goes into, I suppose, cutting rooms. Cutting rooms know what they're doing, obviously, but it's more a case of just a guideline. And then essentially that's the dress that gets made. And then from these guys, all the moths come out, and the collection is kind of undermined, essentially. But and then it goes with the reference of kind of what the colours are for certain things. There's a lot of detail, really, but didn't need to be there. But equally, it's just something that you cover yourself. She knows she's using the right pen for that colour, and there's probably about 200 examples that she can kind of get right, and sort of replacement drawings which were changed in between takes and things like this. But so hero illustrations, so bits that made the screen, which are just quite lovely to look back on, essentially. But some of them are in the files there, so you're more than welcome to see if you'd like. And there's just a little video. Turn that around. There you go.
Baroness, the premiere starts in an hour.
I need more. Keep working.
So yeah, so sorry, an example of a hero illustration, making it to the screen. But subsequently, all of the pens on those desks I now own, because I just afterwards I was like, can I have them? No one else is going to use them. I have the jars. It's amazing. And I also have that little golden sketchbook thing, which is what they were all carrying, which is just really lovely. I'm a thief, is what it is. But all the artworks that the guys were working on as well is produced. And it's got to be said that I'm not the only concept illustration artist on Cruella, but I am for Cruella. So Rob Rowley is the other chap who did the illustrations for Baroness. So there's two different types of illustration, really. And we nearly dropped and rolled then. I didn't know what that was. So yeah, I'm not the only person doing that. But this is essentially an example of basically that piece being, not that piece, but the petal dress and the military jacket being illustrated. I just thought it might be interesting. There's no sound, it's just shows you a bit about it. So there's a lot of time, and it's a privilege to just sit and do, really. I just love losing yourself in the piece, really. And then it's essentially sort of little Cruella style. So after the film, there was they asked if I could illustrate Disney characters in the style of Cruella and video it so that they could use as PR kind of work after. So this is Cruella illustrating Queen of Hearts. And then essentially, I'm just showing you on the next bit, it's not all from scratch because you'd be there forever, but there's then I use a light box, so the illustration underneath, you sort of use as a framework, and then you're allowed to build, and it's just a quicker way of refining your product, essentially. But this is like an example of Cruella's Queen of Hearts. I'm a massive fan of Pro Marker, adore them, just love the way it just goes through the page. And then the next. So it's a framework for which to then it just speeds my process up, essentially. But gives you just enough to start off and maybe do another piece. Gives you the freedom to kind of grow it, really. But I would normally leave it a little bit. But as you see, the ink is kind of, you're doing it for the video, so it's rushing the drawing, I guess, but equally it kind of works. When you think, I think it was cardinal red, and I think lipstick. I think we must have ordered, I think they ordered about 45 of each for Cruella. It was just a prominent colour, but I think they were just saying, like, they used to come into the office and be, Tom, so how many are we ordering today? And I'd be, this was Monday morning. Can I get another 3? Is that okay, Hannah? And she'd be like, yep, I've ordered 5. I'm like, oh, wonderful, that's great. So they knew how much red, obviously, was going to be used in this, but also ink. But it was nice because it's like physical pieces, it was just, I love it. I love having that kind of delivery of your artist equipment. It's just amazing. It was so, so nice. And equally, still have some of them left. And yeah, I guess then product, PR, and PR with the costume illustration. So it just goes on to become a bigger thing, essentially. So once it's drawn, it's a product, and it's used however they see fit. And it's lovely to see where they fit, essentially. It was a piece from the Golden Globes, essentially, centred around Jenny, obviously, and quite rightfully so, but they just back up what's being said. So it was just, yeah, it was super cute. And then they did this is kind of from the Cruella PR bit in the run-up to the film, so it became a whole thing of like layered paper, and I couldn't find that. I didn't actually have the video to show, but it was really lovely. But also it would have just kept me here talking about Cruella forever. So Apologies, I think it does change sometime soon. But yeah, so from concept to finished piece, it's a whole huge journey in between, but there's just a quick sum up of what that is. And then there's the fountain illustration side of like what that she might look like when she's talking to her mother near the end, essentially. So yeah, it's an emotional kind of piece, and it's, you know, her makeup is running, so hence the smudged smoked mark. But equally, it's one like I said to you, I love the darker side of Corella and life, if that makes sense. But there's just lots in that I kind of really like, and she's equally on the table if you'd like to see a bit later on. God, there's more Corella. Sorry. So there's Estella's illustrations. So Estella was the younger girl, or is essentially who Corella is as a youngster. This was the scroll that basically was for her school uniform. So it's like everything that you do. It's like you graffiti your own pencil case. It was that sort of level of work, really. And I did 9 pairs of Converse trainers, all identical. So by the end of it, I hated it. But equally, I have a pair at home, so that's quite nice. But yeah, so there's lots of stuff in there, and you know, you're more than welcome to sort of come and read and whatnot, but later on if you wanted. But there's just little messages to herself, but also maybe self-help supporting messages to myself. You know, so there was things like make your mark. That was quite a big thing for me. And then you're talking to the character almost like she is art. I think Corella is just such an piece of art in herself. But it's like, I am art. Like, it's that question mark. You know, is she thinking she knows she's not quite herself? So, but she knows she needs to be somewhere else, and she's questioning her validity, I guess, in kind of in life. And I just thought there's loads of that. And then also her attitude would be, you know, pay me. There's lots of stuff that she wants to kind of have. Art is dead, you know, ambition. There's just loads of stuff. It just works really. And then I'm sort of most proud of, on the top left, we had a dog at the time called Doug, and he made it in as a graffiti scroll. So Doug is on the Halloween costumes and the merchandise around the world, essentially, and he's no longer with us anymore, bless him. But that was quite a nice little thing, really. Through to Wink's costume, which is just a design of a dog looking like a rat, but just linear drawings, essentially. But this stuff would become product later on, and quite extensively so, which was just amazing to see, really. So there was a lot of like makeup kind of references, and Mac makeup then joined with Corella. There was a whole Mac makeup, which I got one of the palettes. The box is incredible, the way it works, but the artwork is, I only realised the other day, most of the artwork is on the inside of the box, so you don't see it, but it's gorgeous. But it's also within the makeup itself too. Yes, so an example of them where it goes, and I am art, question mark, became t-shirts and whatnot. But that's the box I mean. But it all just concertinas in a magnetic way. It's really beautiful. But that was quite something. Like, it was just really lovely to sort of see where illustration can go, and it did. It just went. You know, it was just lovely, and all from one roll essentially. Liberty Window. So these should be the other way around, sorry. But essentially, quick story about the background is it's a society that she's aspiring to get to, but equally she hated. So she's kind of conflicted with it, really. But this is sort of her illustration of a society which Liberty represents, I guess, and that she's changing the window for the store because she thinks it's drab. So this is what her mark would be, essentially. But again, there's references to kind of her style as that, you know, the long nails and glamour and life and whatnot. But the nails and the long red is basically her reach over society. She's kind of above them, really, and she's actually controlling them, what they buy, what they like. And we don't know it as consumers, but that's kind of what she's doing. And it was incredible. The set for the Liberty, it was just, I've never seen anything like it. It was exactly it, obviously, as you expect, but it's done detail for detail. It's amazing. And this is just the video of that.
These boots are made for walking, and that's just what they'll do. One of these days, these boots are gonna walk all over you.
I just can't leave you looking like that. Be cruel.
Yeah. You keep lying when you ought to.
Why'd you go to sleep in a window?
Oh, but seriously, how much better do you look?
No! No! Hello.
So it carries far. And then essentially post the film sort of release, it was PR. I mean, just lashings of it essentially. It was amazing. But equally, the drawings, the illustrations that were sort of the layer, the sketchbooks, just sort of amalgamated and accumulated to be in these sort of standalone kind of pieces with the costumes. It's all just so, it was just lovely to see really. It's everyone's work involved in 2 images there. It's amazing. So Dom's team, you know, Ian's team, Kirsten's team. Oh, it's just, yeah, it's lovely. So yeah, that's Liberty. Obviously advertising their role in the film, but that was just a lovely exhibition to do. It's on their stairs and their hallways and stuff. And then essentially on the back of that, Florence and the Machine did the official Cruella soundtrack. So I then did PR for the release of that track. So I think Florence then tweets this image on the day of release of the song essentially. But there's back and forth between her in terms of what she likes, what she wanted, and so it was just a world then all of a sudden of just like, oh God, illustration is a product. It was quite eye-opening essentially. So yeah, Florence and the Machine, then Liberty, and then Corella's got her own sketchbook, which is really lovely, which I also have, which you're more than welcome to see as well. But again, product. So it's just artwork as product. It's kind of, I'm hoping what that sort of signifies. And then the next film, which it's a point of interest. It's a lovely one. I'm really, really proud of it. But it's George Miller's Furiosa, and Mad Max. I mean, the scale of that is just, I'm just, in awe of that kind of feeling of in that chest, that music, the lot of it. But it was just, an absolute privilege. So again, a project for Jenny Bevan. So essentially, I've included bits of the script here. And when I put "Ooh hello," that's the bits that I sort of drawn to. So I often you mark the scripts to kind of, I suppose, the bits that you want to start with, and then you kind of work around to get to the other parts really. But you know, sad creatures debauched by the violence of the post-apocalyptic world. For me, that's like a beautiful invitation to draw. It might make a lot of people run, but I love that sort of stuff. So Jenny we had this joke about, you know, if there's a palm tree island or a rotted a pathway through a rotted corpse forest or something, you'd take the rotted corpse forest. And I was like, I would actually, because I think there'd be more to see. But so there's lots of characters in there, like Dementus, the Enforcers, Dirty Dozen. So really, the Dirty Dozen, basically, this is where it's just free reign, just to settle into the project, and it's lovely. So these marks kind of represent like what Jenny does beautifully, and just allows a free reign of exploration, really. And essentially, I kind of looked at the almost like it's not the nicest thing, but it's the electrician caps essentially. So he would have the brass fixings on his head and all of this, but his face is kind of cut out of the mask. So it's the whole relationship that these guys would have, and it's found materials. Okay, that wouldn't really be much of a chance that he'd find that, but equally, if you find something in that post-apocalyptic world, you use it. So a lot of the stuff that you're driven on this one, which is the vision of obviously Jenny Bevan, but then George Miller, it had to have, it's a 3-second rule is what he has. So it has to make sense in 3 seconds. So if what they're wearing doesn't, then it's not in. So that's kind of his thing. So really it's like having something that would be recognizable is quite beneficial for a post-apocalyptic world, really. Like they're fashioning outfits out of stuff. I mean, you might have seen the films or not, but equally you sort of get the gist of as to what that is. So then I kind of highlight what I like, and then you just dream, really, which is really lovely. And at the stage where Dementus was called Dr. Dementus, so, you know, this story is, was he a doctor? Was he, you know, it changed obviously, but there was a time that he might have been something else, as often most of these films often are. But some lovely names: Big Jilly, Fang, Mr. Norton, and Smeg. But don't know where these sit in those characters, but it was just the mood as well, really. Like the headshot guy, it's just enjoying the headshot almost. You know, it's the other side of life, really. But this just shows you a bit of the work that was done on Furiosa. And then this is History Man, essentially. And it's, skin that is tattooed to the point of basically he's, an organic Google. And then it's just this idea that the garment is like sheet-like, his clothing is sheet-like, like paper. So paper's kind of gone. So this guy's kind of advantage is the fact that he tattoos the information on him. He's essentially a walking Google. He's in captivity, but his knowledge is his power. So there's this, this real thought process behind the characters, I suppose, is what it's trying to get into this, is there's loads of information in this that you can kind of take away and just develop upon. And we did, essentially. But like one of the things that I think he either says or it's on his, but it's, 1942, General George Patton swept across North Africa fueled by a daily indulgence of chocolate banana split, which I just think is just bizarre, but equally it is a fact. So I think that was on his garment as well, really. But it's where you can place it. So I put it as marks and smudges because at this time you don't know what the information is going to be. You don't want to get lost in kind of making too much information on this. So often like glyphs and things made a point of it being it would be information. It's not that it's going to be that. It's just something on that garment essentially. And then more of that kind of ilk, I suppose. But equally, then it's interesting because George looks at things and thinks, well, doesn't want it to look like, where would most of the population be going? Are they going to these places for tattoos? Like, he doesn't want it to look too polished because there has to be a sense of place and them doing it themselves. So really, for him, all of the the coloured inks and stuff, it was too much because where would the coloured ink come from? They'd be using ash, they'd be using oil. So then you start to think, actually, that makes a lot more sense, So then you've got this other guy, which is like, obviously, History Man, potentially. And also, you don't know the actors at this point. So you do a mood and a thought process. But then having that idea of that it is, purposeful and point, his garment became this kind of, cover and it had a job to do, essentially. But there's just lots of things, like you tie it into the glasses and just how that could look. It's fun, essentially. And then Jenny really loves this sort of linear shape, and subsequently designers do after that I've worked with too, is it's free enough to suggest something, but it suggests like a seam line within the garment, and it's a point of difference. It could be another fabric, it could be another cloth, and stuff like that kind of makes it into film, really, and you don't notice it, but it's there. But it's nice. It's just a nice kind of idea, really. But History Man, an organic mechanic, and Furiosa as Blackfinger, essentially. So it's just linear representation of something, and then essentially you just develop a little bit more from there, really. But this is like the moment she becomes Blackfinger, and I suppose it's a mood for a look, essentially, and that's that's her. And then a mood for the megalomaniacs with gas guzzlers. So it's just kind of what's drawn and then what makes, it's like Jenny said when we were watching the premiere, she's like, you know what you've done, you know where it fits. There's no one, this was, and it's just so many people involved. It's just from an illustration point of view. And again, I was Jenny's illustrator. There's another chap called Seth who was George's illustrator. There's just, this is just one part of it. But this chap was more a mood for Dementus originally. But then the bagged head kind of, who knows, makes it in. But I often do a mood for the character, for me to reference that this is the chap that you're channeling. And that's what that chap in that middle is. Not the nicest, apologies, but for a Friday morning. And then these points are essentially the call that Jenny calls that we've got the project. There's a project on. It's it's George's second instalment. He's called Dementus. He uses a parachute, but it must be functional. He has a bear, and he gets more red as we develop. She's like, so, and she goes, oh, he's a tyrant. She goes, I mean, you'll love him, Thom Botwood. So, so I got to kind of concept Chris Hemsworth essentially in Dementus. But as you see, it's kind of a different. Initially, the thought process was quite different to what it was. So there's an armour, because we thought that he might have been constantly attacked from people trying to overtake his power and his reign. So it became this much more cloaked, and again, there's a purpose to it. But there was just this image of what the red might have looked like. There was a scene where he was going to be completely naked, and it was he was veins. The more he got enraged, the more the veins were pronounced. So that's what that illustration signified, really, is the veins, which I don't think it made it in the end. But he was a Messiah type character to begin with, who then got steadily worse. So that's what the two illustrations kind of signify. And this was just a mood that he might be, and it's kind of warrior. It's kind of romantic. At one point, I think we had like a romantic style, like meat helmet. Like it was just, you loved it. But it was just, it was great. But equally, lovely then to see where it goes. And then there's the bear. So you just do ideas of what bears might look like. And then, I guess it goes to, the workshops in this is incredible because everything's plated, everything's genuinely made. It's just astonishing. But that's all Australia bound. And then the more kind of, I suppose, the looks that he became, I suppose. But so that's Dementus, who I just think he's just one of the best villains. Not in terms of because it's such a good character. He plays it so well. I just adored it. So that was that. And then there's Beetlejuice. So this is an in-part working of kind of the drawings, and this one is for Colleen Atwood. And she's incredible because you can draw something and she likes, but she can say, he's too wide. So instantly it's like his shoulders are too wide, so we go back and it's just amazing. So again, there's a freedom, but she knows what she wants and how he's got to look, essentially. So this is in part, and then obviously the garment that was made, it's a widened stripe. So whether anyone will notice it, but it's a wider stripe than what it was in the original, essentially. But that's a working drawing. And then that's the finished piece. But what I found quite amazing with that illustration, so this was specifically to show Tim Burton, I think it was in production, but prior to anything going into cutting rooms. And these are the ones that goes for him to see. But I was amazed by the pose on the cinema kind of PR poster, because it was just sort of the drawing, and I just looked and thought, well, that's just a really lovely little nod. I don't know if it is, but it's just a nice little thing, really, albeit the boots are completely different. These are just the phases of his life within the film, essentially. So that was Beetlejuice. There's others, but we can drown you in ink, essentially. And then Snow White for Sandy Powell. So again, this kind of project is sort of based on, again, they're in here. You're kind of given cloth samples, so it's the cloth. You get like a linear kind of representation of what Sandy would like things to be, and then you just get to dream, essentially, and get to draw. So this lady she's pretty substantial, actually. I forget the dimensions, but she's huge. And it's obviously the evil Queen Gal Gadot. But the various sort of stages of a mark, really, and a drawing, which it just sells an idea, I suppose. Like this might go to, I don't know, it might go to the director, it might go to producers, but they just sort of see, equally I used the wrong, it's a sequin piece, but you get given that cloth and then you just sort of make some marks that help support what that might look like, really. And there's this two-tone of, her face. She's evil queen, but there's a beauty and there's a ghostliness as well. So lots of hidden meaning that I know are there, which she wouldn't necessarily, essentially. Again, costume illustration. So that's what I guess would be costume illustration. Snow White from a point of view of Cruella, which I popped in. So that was something I just had in my head. I didn't in the end get to work on Snow White, which is no problem at all. But these were the characters that I worked upon, even to the point of like the necklace, really. So you concept something. So this is like studio based, but also from home as well. So the jewelry was from home. You kind of show some sketches to Sandy. So what is this kind of the thought? Yes. And then you develop it further, and then it kind of makes it to be in. It's a product. So illustration is product, and I'm just really proud of that because it's. I never knew as a kid. I didn't realise it was really. And if you are good at something in art, often it gets lost and forgotten. And for me, it's like it's not. It's actually something that keeps me working, and I'm just really, really proud of that, really. But again, it's all the same kind of equation, as it were. Absorbing information. Sandy's vision. The cloth is incredible on this piece. I've not seen the film, actually, if I'm honest, but the cloth is fantastic. And I just remember thinking, that's really, really nice to do. And I just took it on board. I did at the bottom, but it then makes its way to the top. So there's little changes, but it just gets the gist across, really. So that's the product. But again, way bigger than that contribution. There's so many people who are way more talented. And then essentially artwork as commission, which I suppose my work is through film, but equally this is a commission piece for the Savoy Grill, Gordon Ramsay's grill. There was a refurbishment and they wanted 8, I believe, illustrations of past famous diners. Yeah, so essentially these now hang. You've got James Dean, you've got, I'm going to go memory blank here, and I drew them. Marlene Dietrich and John Wayne. This is just an example of them. They're pretty substantial pieces, actually, and they were quite daunting to do, but because you don't work in that scale, but it's really lovely to have actually done that for them. And Miss Piggy, of all things. And she's next to the chef's table, which is just beautiful, really. So she's there in all her glam. Matching handbag and shoes, which is really lovely as well. And essentially, Winston Churchill, I thought this was quite lovely. This was his seat. I didn't realize, so when he sat there, that was his table. So his illustration is actually above where he sits, which I just think is really lovely. It's just a tie-in. Whether you agreed with, obviously, political, it's not about that. It's just a lovely sort of nod to a tradition and a history, and it's there now. But I've got to say, of all of this, the tiles, I couldn't get over the tiles in that place are fantastic. Like, anyway, that's not what it's about, but I was just lost. I couldn't believe the tiles. They're like a really lovely relief. Anyway, yeah, so it's a nice venue. So if you do get to go, yeah, I was able to do that, and that's me. So.